Hi. Almost everyone watches me without a subscription. Please support my channel with a subscription. I try for you. Thank you.
Story 1. NMIL wants to be present at my wife's birth. The situation between my MIL and us, me, 33M, and my wife, 36F, are very rocky. We have been NC with her since the birth of our first child. That woman is a pure BNTCH. Long story short, my ex, MIL's younger daughter, cheated on me with my wife's ex-husband, and MIL knew and supported it. You can read about the longer version in my profile. So, for that she suffered consequences. Her sister doesn't want to talk to her, FIL divorced her. She blames my wife for all of this. I swear this woman has hurt my wife in many ways. She would somehow manage blame everything on my wife. We cut her out of our lives when she created a fuss when my wife was pregnant with our son. She yelled at my wife during her baby shower because she demanded that my wife change her due date because on the same due date her precious golden child, wife's sister, might give birth. They had a spat and MIL accused my wife for ruining everything. Everyone hates her because of my wife. My wife, for most parts, was a little doormat when it came to her mother, but that day she didn't stop. She yelled back saying it was her fault that everyone hates her because she betrayed her daughter. She ruined the marriage of her daughter and her TTY attitude towards her, and unless she is ready to take accountability of her actions, she will not be welcomed here. Since then we decided to go and see. It's been 3 years. But few weeks ago, we get messages from unknown number to talk. It was MIL, we talked on the phone. She sounded remorseful and said that she is willing to work through with this. But after what she pulled last time, we said no. Then she started harassing my wife and demanding that she sees her grandchildren being born because she was deprived the last time. She also threatened us with grandparents' rights in court. I wish that woman would just leave us alone. Update: this isn't a big update on MIL, but on me and my wife. She went into labor 2 days ago. She gave birth to our twin daughters who are in good health. She will be discharged tomorrow if everything is okay. My girls are sleeping right now as I am writing this. MIL didn't show up at her birth. Maybe because my wife went into labor in the middle of the night, we could only inform FIL and my sister. I know they haven't told MIL, but I know the news will spread soon. I hope she doesn't create any more trouble for us. I have spoken to FIL to not come here until my wife is in stable condition and only meet us after we arrive home. I am really exhausted, to say the least. This is the first time in 2 days I am on social media. So far everything is calm. No threatening messages or calls. So, I thought I will give you guys a mini update. Edit: just want to add that my twins actually got the hair of their mother and my nose. I got my own set of Weasley twins. I am happy to have my ginger army with me. Yes, my son is dark ginger. Update: this is going to be long. This story begins almost 11 years ago when I, 33M, was a fresh college graduate. I got a job in a company that belonged to my father's friend. I used to handle their budget and accounts. Basically was an accountant. So anyways, there I met Susan, 31M, and she was 20 back then. I used to work with her sister's fiancé Bill, he was 27. That's how I met Susan, because she was an intern in that company. It is important to note that the company belonged to Bill's father. When I first met Susan, I was head over heels in love with her. She wasn't just a beautiful blonde bombshell, but also a funny and smart girl. She used to flirt with me a lot. And it was pretty much an open secret that we had feelings for each other. When I asked her out, Bill was the one who shouted, "Oh, finally." Now let me tell you about someone who is important to my story. That was Susan's older sister Annie, 24 back then. She and Bill have been dating since college. And she was one of the most awesome people I have ever met. She was not just kind, but also very fun to hang out with. She became one of my closest friends when I was going out with Susan. But unlike Susan, she was pretty much the black sheep of her family. The only reason they actually tolerated her is because Bill was from an affluent family. And honestly, her parents were greedy. They also hated her because she had red hair, since no one in their family had red hair. Susan would sometimes protest, but oftentimes she would keep it quiet. So everything was going great. I became closer to her BIL, and he offered me a good position in his company. I rejected it because I decided to try my luck in computer science. Annie was the most helpful during this time. Since career shifting was really challenging, she helped me find a good mentor for it. She even offered for me to stay at her place since she was moving in with Bill. I honestly owe this woman my life. So, after 3 years of dating, I proposed to Susan and she said yes. By then, Bill and Annie were married and planning to start a family soon. Then came the doom. I started to see Susan was being very distant. She would always be on her phone and chat. Before that, we would share everything with each other, even what's on our phone. But she became very secretive. She would often stay late, and when I would ask her, she would get really irritated. I started to become suspicious because she was never like this. She even stopped initiating sex. And whenever I would initiate it, she would just brush it off. So that day came when she left her phone at home and went to her office without it. I was at home during that day and picked it up. I actually knew her password. There I found evidence. There were chats and a couple of nude exchanges between Bill and her. Anyone with a functioning brain would know she was having an affair with her sister's husband. I also found some chats between Susan and her mother, and she advised Susan to not say anything to Annie and that it is okay to cheat before marriage, and made her promise that she would stop once we got married. This just broke me. I spent the rest of the week avoiding her and crying in my car. I thought about our fun times. How could she do this to me? Moreover, how could she do this to her own sister who loved her to death? I felt sick. I decided to expose her and Bill. I don't deserve this, and neither did Annie. So I devised a plan. I already had a couple of screenshots, but I wanted to dig more. It wasn't that hard because Bill and Susan were really careless. They used the company's card to go on these so-called business trips. I also tracked her phone via a spyware that I was able to install. I thought what I had was enough. I was planning to collect all of their conversations and also sex tapes and make a slideshow of it. But then I struck gold. Bill called me to his office and asked me to fix his computer. Bill was really a boomer when it came to these things. Something in me just clicked. Because Bill has always been shady in my opinion. So, I pretended to fix it. There was nothing wrong with his computer. It was just a bit slow. I made it seem like it has issues with the motherboard and somehow convinced him to give me 2 hours to fix it and give it to him as good as new. He hesitated at first. But since he was a dumbass, he gave it to me. I looked into his files and didn't find anything suspicious. But then this dumbass had a note that contained a list of all the passwords. It also had passwords of his other Google accounts. And holy shit, he was a criminal. He was a tax evader. Not only that, he was a creep too. I found some inappropriate messages from him with a 14-year-old. It just made me more sick because Susan was cheating on me as a predator. Like, is the bar for men really that low for her? I copied all of them into my hard drive. I decided to bring Bill down. So I collected all the evidence of him being a fraud. I made several copies of Susan and Bill's affair. I talked to Susan about having an engagement party. She agreed immediately. She has no idea what's about to come her way. Before exposing her, I went to see Annie. The only reason is that I really respect her and I wanted to tell her the truth. I didn't want this affair to come as a shock to her and humiliate her. I met her and presented all the evidence. She was devastated and cried like hell. At one point, she started hysterically laughing and said, "I wish I knew this 4 weeks ago." She told me that she found out that she was pregnant 2 days ago and wanted to surprise her family. It just made me sadder. I mean, she doesn't deserve any of this. I hated myself so much that I even proposed to postpone my plans. I did tell her what I was about to do, and it is best that she is not present. She can live with my sister if she wants some time away from Bill and her family. She agreed, and I drove her to my sister's house, who knew about this whole thing. Now the day came, I invited all of our relatives and her relatives to our party and also our friends. I gathered all of them in a great hall and told them I wanted to present a slideshow. I started very lightly by showing pictures of me and Susan together. And I went to the part where I showed them a picture of Bill and Susan kissing. I could see in the audience that the smile whipped out from her face. I didn't stop. I explained their affair in a very excruciating detail. I even went to the part where he was chatting up with an underage girl. Bill tried to stop it, but I told the guards to guard the stage and projector room. After I was done, I looked at everyone's face. Susan's dad's head was hanging low in shame. There were people gossiping, and her mother looked like she saw a ghost. I looked at Susan, who was sobbing, and told her, "You can keep the ring, but we are done. The wedding is off." I was walking towards the parking lot. Susan followed me and screamed, "It's not what it looks like." Let me explain. I didn't turn around. I drove to a cheap hotel that I was already planning on staying at. I was as usual bombarded with messages and calls so much that I had to turn it off. I stayed at that hotel for like a week, and later stayed with a friend of mine for a few more weeks. I turned on my phone and the inbox was full. The first person I decided to contact was my sister. She asked me where I had been and then gave me awful news. Annie miscarried the day I left. She doesn't want to talk to anyone. I forgot that nobody knows where she is. Not even Bill. I rushed to my sister's house only to meet a really thin Annie. She has lost a lot of weight. She looked like she wasn't eating well. I sat down beside her and told her that I was sorry and I was also to blame because I blindsided her with the news at her critical stage. She only cried in my arms. She eventually opened up about how much she felt betrayed. All her life she wanted to earn her mom and dad's approval, but it was like walking on eggshells. She also loved her sister. She has done everything for her and she betrayed her. She loved Bill deeply. So much that she left her high-paying job just so she could be closer to him. Annie even thought about killing herself. But she didn't want to because she knew it would upset me a lot. That is when I developed a really soft spot for Annie. Eventually we became very close because we went through the same trauma. I helped her with her divorce proceeding. And we both attended therapy. Whenever she would have nightmares, she would come to my room and we would chat until she fell asleep. She doesn't want to see anyone. Not even her parents. She was doing a little bit better each day, and I didn't want to disturb her by calling her parents. But those vultures came to my sister's house. Somehow they knew Annie was here. Her mother, a true bitch, demanded to meet her daughter. Susan was screaming and accusing me of sleeping with her sister as revenge. Her dad, who is a doormat, was silent as usual. I had enough of these lunatics and screamed at Susan first. And told her that I am not as disgusting as her to start an affair, and even if I did, she has no say in it because she doesn't own me. She has some audacity to scream at me and showing fake concerns for her sister when she has been fucking her husband for like a year. Where was her concern when she was having an affair? She never thought that what she was doing would hurt her sister. Her sister has done everything for her. She is an ungrateful bitch for hurting her sister in the worst possible ways. I didn't spare her family. I called him a bunch of scoundrels. I stood up for Annie and berated them for being the worst parents. They never loved her and always criticized her and compared her to their golden child, who is just a glorified gold digger and a homewrecker. They have the nerve to show up in here after hurting her for all these years, and Annie was such an angel that she never complained for a bit. I didn't spare her mother either. I called her a cunt and a failed mother who raised a daughter that has no integrity and a whore, and she has some nerve to come here and demand to see her daughter when she hid the affair and even encouraged her daughter to wreck another daughter's home. Needless to say, I sent them packing and told them if they ever show up I would call the police. They eventually stopped. But her father was the one who secretly met her. I only let him because he showed some actual remorse for treating her poorly for all these years. Her dad at that time was separated from her mother after hearing that the mother hid the affair. He even cut off contact with Susan and disowned her. Annie told him that it would take a long time for things to be all right. My life was going pretty smoothly. I also informed Bill's company of his wrongdoings. He was fired from the company. He also went to jail for associating himself with a minor, but his dad bailed him out. That mofo really tried to convince Annie to give their relationship another try, but Annie stood her ground and went through her divorce. After her divorce was finalized, Annie and I went on a celebratory dinner. You guys can guess what is happening. We hooked up that night and started dating shortly after. And I must say she is 1000x better than Susan. Not just in loving me and caring, but also in bed. I still cannot believe Bill would cheat on her for some mediocre sex with Susan who lacked imagination. Annie and I dated for 2 years before I proposed to her. But obviously Susan protested it. She actually went on social media and bashed us. But since everyone knew what she did, no one came to her support. She actually lost some of her friends. She even lied to Annie that I cheated on her when I was in a relationship with her. But I called out on her BS. She was not satisfied with that. The last straw came when we were having a get-together with my family and friends. And Susan showed up with evidence that Annie was cheating on me with one of her coworkers. Annie got scared because she thought I would believe her crap. But I pressed on and asked for the details of the coworker. She obviously didn't expect me to question her in detail. So she started to stammer. She didn't know what to do, so she finally accepted her defeat and screamed at her sister that she always got the best, and even tried to tell her make her feel insecure by saying that Bill preferred her more than Annie. And that she was bad in bed. And that I would get bored of her easily and come to Susan. I laughed at her face and told her to fuck off, and she was mediocre at best in bed. Bill only lied to her, otherwise he wouldn't still try to beg Annie into his life. After the Susan fiasco was over, Annie told me that we should just elope and get married because she fears that Susan will try to do something at her wedding and ruin it. I agreed, and we got married with just 4 people present in the ceremony. We decided to have the reception after our honeymoon. And Annie was right. The day of our reception, Susan announced that she was getting married to Bill. I knew she did this just to spite me and Annie, but we didn't care. We are happy just with us. But unfortunately, Susan and Bill's marriage didn't last long after she caught him cheating with his assistant. Susan became pregnant with Bill's son and now is a single mom. Bill hardly contributes, but since his father threatens him to cut him off, he has to pay child support. Well, as for me and Annie, we are good. We have a 3-year-old son, and now she is pregnant with our twin daughter. She is due any moment now. We are still in contact with her father, but my NMIL not so much. She actually created havoc when she learned that Annie was pregnant, but that is another story. I couldn't have imagined a better life for myself. Edit. Hello guys, it is OP here. I know a lot of you think this is fake. Honestly, I am not surprised, because even my friends who know this story and was present when I was presenting all the facts about my ex cheating finds it hard to believe. My nephew was the one encouraged me to write it here. But I knew that people will not believe it. I have heard a lot of times that my love story with Annie is like a Hallmark movie, LOL. But it is 100% true. I know I am not the best person to tell a complicated story, but I did skip a lot of parts because it is hard to summarize the last 11 years in one post. I also have some crazy NMIL and SIL stories too. But I do not think posting it would be a good idea.